It's a great pleasure to me to introduce an old friend, Tom Dozeman. I mentioned all of his academic credentials last time, so but what I didn't mention was no, he's been playing since our last class. So what I didn't mention is that he spent most of his teaching career at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, and it was that institution that enabled him to play and study and go on sabbaticals and that sort of thing. Welcome, Tom.
I didn't know anything about it. He hired me. I thought, okay, we'll go with this. And it was great.
Simon John Preach.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah, I mean, we were tag team. So, okay, you want to work? Okay, I gave you a handout, but let's get back to where we were last week, so we're organized. We taught ourselves how to read flood mythologies. And what we're kind of realizing is when you get into this literature, some of which is familiar, flood stories in the Bible, man, that's Sunday school. And that can pose a problem. Literature that's too familiar, especially if you're religious and you own it, then you got trouble, man, because you think you know this stuff and you don't. So we spent a class setting up a framework of how our writers meant for us to read this. And that framework, if you recall, was tripartite: pre-flood, flood, post-flood. So the framework we get when we do that, the things we want to ask ourselves, I mean, we can focus on the flood itself. That's not that interesting. It's all standard tropes from the ancient Near East. Same thing happens. There's birds, there's a window in the big boat. I mean, that's all just given. What we really want to know is, this is what gets us into the world of the writers, pre-post, because that's where they're reflecting on the nature of the world they live in. What is power anyhow? How does it really work? What is the created order? How did that come about? What is the relationship of the gods to the created order? Is it one of conflict? Is it one of indifference? A lot of myths are indifferent. God's got other things to do. They're busy. Or is there something else going on? And then, of course, the reason they're writing these mythologies is to ask the fourth question, and that is, what are we doing here? Where's the exit doors? Where's the trap doors? How does all of this work? How do we as humans achieve what we are meant to achieve in relationship to creation and the gods? And last week we looked at, what did we look at? The Eridu Genesis, a kind of a truncated Sumerian mythology, gave us a little bit, wasn't a whole lot there. We saw that there is a preoccupation with monarchs, of course. You and I don't matter in the ancient world. Nobody's writing stories about us. They're writing stories about monarchs. They represent the whole. And we saw that king list pre-post. See that they're always thinking pre-post. We're in a post-apocalyptic world, but there was a pre-apocalyptic world. And then we looked at, the biggest text we looked at was the Atrahasis mythology, which is a pretty standard mythology. Now, all of these are old. These are old texts. Late 3rd, 2nd millennium texts. Now, and well, the Atrahasis it's an environmental text, isn't it? It's a pollution text. It's not a pollution text. It's a population text. Why is it every baby isn't born? Why is it there's disease? Why is it things don't just naturally develop? And in the post-apocalyptic world of Atrahasis, there's all nasty stuff going on. You have to be careful. There's demons and Peshitu, and that's why. And why is that? Because Elul couldn't sleep. That is, there wasn't harmony. The goal is harmony. I think, not always, but. So now we're going to go into a familiar text. And that's my handout. Now, one thing I want to say, moving into this familiar text, is that we're dropping in time. I mean, we are dropping in time over 1,000 years. So by the time our writers in the Hebrew Bible are addressing the flood mythology, they can go to the Library of Congress and there's a whole aisle. They can figure out, they got to research before they're writing and decide how they want to go at this, because now we have a highly standardized tradition that is 2,000 years old and has been a staple of cultural identity. So our writers are sophisticated people, probably had to, do graduate work in either Egypt or Babylon to do this work, right? They're multilingual, they're reading these texts, and they are now producing their answer to our questions. And the handout I gave you is basically a version of the flood. Now, I need to say something about that because we cannot possibly study the flood comprehensively today. I'd have to come back yet a third time to really do the flood stories in the Bible, because there's two of them. They're woven together like a braid, and they're not that hard to pull apart. If you look at my handout for a minute, I gave you that grid on top. You see that grid? It's got creation, and then it's got pre-flood, and then it's got flood, and then it's got post-flood. So that's how we're going to read today. Lop off creation, because that's an account of the flood. It's my favorite one, but we're not going to do it. The writer who wrote Genesis 1, that is not meant to be read in isolation. You know that now. That story's got to be read in the larger context of a flood mythology. And that writer gives you a genealogy in Genesis 5. You see on my little handout, I have some things in bold and some things I didn't bold. That's the account we're not going to study. So you get a creation account and you get a genealogy where all those old people are. Methuselah following the king list tradition. They're all living 900 years, and all right. And then that writer gives you a flood account that we're not going to work on. And then that writer comes back and gives you another funny genealogy, which we call the Table of Nations. What does the post-apocalyptic world look like? And then they give you the landscape as they see it. So that's a version. And that version, friends, get Barry to do it for you. That version is so crucial to Judaism and Christianity, much more so than the one we're going to read today, because that one deals with the problem of blood pollution. We're going to deal with blood pollution today, too. Hebrew Bible's about blood. So is Christianity. I mean, Easter yesterday is about drinking the blood, friends. Why are you drinking blood? Because it's an antidote to blood, right? Judaism and Christianity are based on blood out of context, which creates violence. Now, that gives you cancer. Now, how do you get rid of what is the chemotherapy to cancer? Magical blood. That's the blood of Jesus in the Christian Eucharist, but in Judaism, it gives rise to kosher law. They go at the blood problem slightly differently and really control their diet because of that problem. So I love those texts, but we can't do that one. We're going to do the other one, okay? Which is also about blood violence. And because it's not as radical as the priestly one that goes right for the problem, that is, deals with blood manipulation to create health. That's what the sacrificial system is. Think of it as a big hospital. And you have many priests who have varieties of doctors. And if, you got bone cancer, then you got a priest that deals with it. And that's kind of blood manipulation and so forth and so on. We're not going to do that. So all of that is just to say no. We're going to do the other one, okay? And this is the one that's also too familiar, the garden story. Now, we saw that the garden was terribly important did we read Gilgamesh? I forget. Gilgamesh is a mythology of which tablet 11 is the flood. And that is the hero of the flood story in some ancient Near Eastern mythologies. We call him Utnapishtim. He's the Noah. He is granted eternal life. That's a wild card, man. And because he does, they put him in the garden, Dilman. And he's the only human has eternal life, but the hero in Gilgamesh wants eternal life too. He's the Ur-Mensch, the original city builder, and he doesn't know why he can't have eternal life too. So he takes a boat and goes to Utnapishtim. And Utnapishtim says, yeah, well, that's only me, buddy. I'm sorry, but I'll tell you a secret. There's a plant. If you get that plant and you eat that plant, I'll build you a house next to me. There can be two of us. So this Gilgamesh finds the plant and he's rowing his boat and he's going to go home and cook it up. And a snake comes up out of the water and grabs his plant and steals it from him. And the snake now becomes a special animal in creation because it can resurrect. It can shed its skin. So it's like no other creature because it got that stinking plant and Gilgamesh didn't get it. Nuts. All right. Those are motifs that are going to pop up in our story. Our authors know this story. It's a massive story in the ancient Near East. And let's just see how they deal with these motifs. So are you ready to roll? I'm going to walk you through this text. You're going to really get sick of it. And when you do, just kind of let me know. It won't make any difference. We got to get through it. So let's read this version of the flood, and let's begin with the pre-flood world. The garden and the Adam from the Adamah. So I've given you a little Hebrew, and Barry's got his Hebrew Bible if we want to play further. I've given you the Hebrew because this is, in my opinion, some of the best literature in the Hebrew Bible. It's so subtle. It's so economical. There are so few words and so much gets said. And you'll see that in a half hour. So I've transcribed a little Hebrew in so we can play with how this writer's working a little bit. You ready to go? These are the generations of the heavens and the earth. So the garden story really isn't about the human. It's the genealogy of the heavens and the earth. So our writer's raising the bigger question than the human question. The context is, what is this world we live in? And it has a genealogy. It has an evolution. That word has much more impact in modern society, but I can't think of a better one at this point. So the world is developmental to these writers. It doesn't drop from heaven like the cities in the Atrahasis or in the Eridu or in the King list, where it comes full blown. Wham! You get the drops down to earth. That's not what our writers think. There's evolution to creation and the role of the human in it. Sticky wicky business. And when these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they created, in the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens. When, okay, it's not an ex nihilo, it's not a creation from nothing. What you have is the Sahara Desert. It's just a wasteland. When no plant of the field was yet on earth, no herb of the field had yet sprung up. Why? There's no moisture. You can't live in it, whatever it is. And furthermore, go back to last week, there's no worker bees. You got to have worker bees to get things rolling. And there was no one to till the, and here's a key word for us, the Adamah, this wasteland. It has a name now. It's Adamah. We call it ground, right? I think not earth. That would be a different word in Hebrew, but ground kind of stuff. But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the Adamah. So now moisture is coming up. So there's activity and some change built into stuff. And then Yahweh God formed there's a lot of creation motifs in the Hebrew Bible and in the ancient Near East. And in this one, the deity is a potter, works with clay. And the deity Yatzard formed, think of it, Jeremiah talks like this too. Yahweh's a potter. And Jeremiah says, yeah, and you know what that means, don't you? Potters who don't like their pots usually smash them. Right? So this is that same motif. Form the what? Now you got to stay with the word plays in Hebrew. Form the atom. Now, I actually don't quite know how to read this text. In fact, I went out for lunch with Barry and Doug last week, and we talked about this a little bit because my teacher, old prominent feminist scholar named Phyllis Tribble, kind of made her career on this text. And her point, and I kind of think it holds today, although it's slipped, this text is too imprecise to hang too much weight on anything. But her argument was, this isn't a name. It has a definite article in Hebrew. I am not the Tom. I'm Tom. So why would Ha-Adam be Adam? She said, no. Whatever this is, it's Adamah. It's junk. And now it's a pot made out of it. But what is it? It's this stuff. It's not marked for anything. It's not a human. I kind of like this reading. I've kind of stuck with it. But you decide. You got the text in front of you. Let me keep going. Then Yahweh formed the Adam from the dust of the Adamah. Why? Because you can make clay now. There's some mist in this desert junk. And breathed in it. Animated it. Breathed into its nostrils the breath of life, and the Adam became, hey, it's animated. Think claymation. I used to watch that as a kid. And Yahweh planted a garden now. Here we go. Think Dilman. In the east. And he put the Adam, whom he had formed out of the Adamah, and Yahweh made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So there are magical trees in the middle of this garden. This is a potent garden. And then we get the geography of it. These texts get overwritten. Somebody wants us to know where this garden is. I don't think this was part of the story originally, but I love this geographical description. It starts in Magic Land, right? There's 4 rivers that flow out of the garden, and this also is true of the Jerusalem temple in Hebrew Bible tradition. These same rivers. I used to work in the what was it called again? The Hebrew Institute for Advanced Study in Jerusalem. And I'd be there with archaeologists who knew a whole lot more than I did. And we would go down into the bowels of Jerusalem where the Gihon is. See, in Jewish tradition, these rivers flow out. But in this text, they don't. They're someplace else. And one river goes to Magic Land, Havilah, where you can walk around, pick up gold. How many gold pieces do you want? Right? And then what's the other one? The Pishon, the Gihon, which goes to Cush. And in the Hebrew Bible, Cush is Magic Land too. Don't kid yourself. Moses marries a Cushite. Cush is a very potent place. And then it moves it into everyday world, the Tigris and the Euphrates. So this text goes from the fantastic to the lived experience of the reader. They don't want you to view this otherworldly. We're in the world of ancient Judaism. There is no other world. What you see is what you get. Everything's here. So they do this more utopian kind of play with, like, from the edge back into the middle. I love that text. It's not that important to the whole story, actually, but Yahweh God took the Adam, put him in the garden to do what? We saw that last week. He's a worker bee. He's going to work it. And Yahweh commanded the Adam, all right, you can eat freely of every tree in this garden, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you can't eat that. It's been a while. I haven't been working for the last few years, so my brain's starting to go soft. But I think that the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, which really are called law, the Torah, I think there's 516 laws in it. It's really not read to be a narrative. It's read to be a law book. And this is law number 1, friends. This is law number 1. The rabbis talk about this. This is the first law. And it's going to spawn all the other 515 because it's going to get broken. And it's going to create such complexity. Then Yahweh God said, it is not good. It's very interesting. It's a developmental text. This is sort of hit or miss. I got stuff moving here. The landscape's starting to look like something, but then the deity takes a half step back and says, I don't like it. I don't like it. Well, why don't you like it, Mr. It is a Mr. Deity. It's not good that the Adam is alone. I only made one. What am I going to do with one worker bee? So it turns into a problem. See, who is this Adam? What do you mean you made one? Let's keep reading. I will make him a helper. The English, I don't think, conveys the Hebrew, but I don't actually know what the Hebrew means. The Hebrew is ezer kenegdo. I will make the yin to his yang. And saying his is premature. I will make him a helper as his partner. So out of the Adamah, God, here we go. This is now this deity's trying to get from 1 to 2. How is this deity doing it? Well, here we go. Let's see what works. Let's see what sticks to the wall. So out of the Adamah, God formed every animal of the field, every bird of the air, and brought them to the Adam, who's got some power, because to be able to name in the ancient world is a very powerful act. And this Adam can name things. So this is not casual. To see what he would call them. And whatever the Adam called the living creature, that was its name. But you have to read this text in light of the problem. The problem is to look in the mirror and see the yin to your yang. So when he is naming, what he's really saying is, that's not me. That's not me. That's a cow. That's a goat. That's a bird. So it's just, so the deity's pottery wheel is just going like crazy. And the Adam's saying, nope, 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 Nope. And now the whole creation is filled with creatures and no success. Because the goal was the yin to the yang, the azer kenegdo. You see how this text is going? This is a very different kind of creation mythology. Usually these gods hammer down the product. Keep reading with me. Yeah, the Adam gave names to all the cattle and birds. Blah, 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 blah. So Yahweh God, now that this, it's nice that we have creation, but basically didn't work. Failed. So the deity takes a new tactic. No more pottery. My hands are sore. I'm going to put the Adam into magical sleep. And in Hebrew, we call that tarduma. Tarduma is something, Rip Van Winkle, something deep. He's not taking a nap. He's going deep under. I will, and so God caused a deep sleep to fall on the Adamah, and he slept. Every third word in this text, I don't know its meaning, and I'm serious. And he took his ribs. I don't think that word in Hebrew means rib. I'm not sure what it means. I have a colleague in Los Angeles, Zioni Zevet. You know him, Barry. He's written on this many times. It's a little obsessed by it, I think. He thinks the deity split him. Just whacked him. And closed up its place with flesh. And then, did a little cosmetic surgery on half. Now you got another half. Right? What is he after? He's after the azer kenegdo, the yin to the yang. That is gender and sexuality. Because without that, you can't repopulate. The one, do you see what this text is? So really, you got to ask yourself, was the Adam even a human or what? Well, now we transition much closer to the world I know. And keep reading with me. He took one of the ribs and put it in the flesh, and the rib that Yahweh had taken from Adam, he made into, now we get a new word, Isha. My sister-in-law's Turkish. Her name's Aisha, right? Just means woman. But that introduces a new level of identity into this stuff. And brought her to the Adam. Remember, he's the namer. He's the one that decides if it's successful or not. And so far, it's been a train wreck. Then the Adam said, this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called Isha. Well, we already knew that. It's the next line we didn't know. Because she came from, I'm an Ish. I'm an Ish. But how does he know he's an Ish? Because he finally sees the yang to his yang. You see how this is it's a children's story, but it's highly sophisticated. These writers they're in the grit of it. Therefore, an Ish, a man, shall leave his father and mother and cling to his Ishto, his Ish, and they become one flesh, and Adam and the woman were both naked. Now, that's just not an ornamental detail. This text is way too economical. Why did this writer go here? And not only were they naked, abrumim in Hebrew, but they have the inability to experience shame. Now, if I were up here doing this lecture naked, I would know it, and you would know it, and the police would be here. So what is this writer saying? This isn't the world you live in yet, Tom. We're still on the way to it. There was animated clay. Now there's gender sexuality. But these people don't know if they're coming or going. They're naked and they don't know it. Okay, end of episode 1. Can't be the end of the story, or we're all stripping right now. Now, ready for episode 2? There's that snaky snake that we saw in Gilgamesh. Now, the serpent was more crafty. Arum. What is the word for naked? Arum. See, our writers like to do what we call paronomasia. Hebrew is it's imprecise syntactically, but it's rich in sounds. So our writer's playing and has introduced a new character, but this character is actually got it all over this Ish and Isha, running circles around them, as the snake tends to do in the ancient Near East. I hate snakes. I truly hate them. I just saw somebody try to get a boa constrictor on TV out of some muck, and I thought, who in their right mind would do this? But in the ancient Near East, the snake is a magical creature because of that shedding, that resurrection. My wife works in medicine. The symbol of the doctors is the snake. Snake's a symbol of health in the ancient Near East. That's the world we're in here. When they pick up the motif of snake, they're talking about something that's got a lot of power, a lot of power. So this snake says to the Isha, did God say, you will not eat from any tree in the garden? And the Isha said to the serpent, well, we can eat of the tree, we can eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. But God said, here's that one rule, first Torah. I lost my place. But the serpent said, I lost my place. But you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you will die. That's a new motif. That's the Isha giving us that motif, right? That's a reported motif. Whenever you get that in literature, you're kind of wondering, well, where'd that come from? Is it reliable? Is that a reliable motif? But the serpent said to the Isha, you're not going to die. For God knows that when you eat of it, boom, you will acquire self-consciousness. You're going to wake up. You're not going to just be clay motion marked for sex. You're going to be something else altogether. And you will be like God, knowing good and evil. That is, you can become an ethical being. You're going to have self-consciousness. You're going to be able to evaluate things. Now, that's much closer to my world. We're getting there, friends. This is closer to my world. I think I'm a little more than clay motion, but my wife doesn't. So when the Isha saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she ate it. And she gave it to her Ish. Wake up, buddy. Wham. Now we're in the world of, by breaking a law, you acquire the ability to evaluate law. You see, I love this story because in like 25 words, it creates ethics. breaking that law is a necessity to be a human. It's got this paradox built into it. And what happens? Tom, put on clothes if you're going to lecture at HASP. They knew they were naked. This writer's just plain. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. And they heard the sound of Yahweh walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. That is, as far as I can tell in this story, the writer sees them having tea around 6 at night in the garden. And it's 6 o'clock and Yahweh's coming for tea. And the Adam and his Isha hid themselves. Now there is self-consciousness and distance between them and deity. From the presence of Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. But Yahweh called to the Adam and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "Well, I heard the sound of you in the garden." New motif. I was afraid. Clay motion can't be afraid. Why were you afraid? Because I was naked. See, now we're getting a complicated story, a human that's layered. And I hid myself. And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you to eat?" And the Adam said, "It was the Isha." Now we're in my world. You see how this is becoming a complex ethical story. And this, what started is just animated clay into the splitting, the creation of the human is androgynous. That's a pretty common motif in the ancient Near East. Plato thinks so. If you read the Symposium, he too thinks that the human comes from the one who is then split. And our writers writing in that tradition, I think. So who told you? The woman. Now we get accusations, and then we finish this scene out. Okay, it's a new world order. Okay, you got ethics. You can break laws. You are self-conscious about me as another. Oh, now what is this world going to look like? Yahweh said to the serpent, "Because you have done this," new motif in the story, extremely important motif. Yahweh introduces the notion of cursing. You have this yin yang in the Hebrew Bible. You can bless and you can curse. And these are both magical concepts. They're not, I'm mad. No. Doug, you used to do the benediction and you bless. And in the history of the church, that is actually medicine because you drank the health blood. Now the clergy person who's special because they gave it to you has the power to kind of goo you up to go. That's a blessing. Yahweh does that a lot. But now Yahweh starts something opposite that, and it is curse. So he cursed, "Cursed are you among all animals and among all wild creatures," not because you can resurrect and lose your skin and get new skin. No, you're going to be a belly crawler. You're going to live in the dust. To the woman, he said, we're back to a fertility motif. Now, this is the world of Atrahasis. Yeah, you're going to reproduce now. You're marked for gender. There's sexuality in the world, but you're going to wish you hadn't. You're going to wish you hadn't. I will greatly increase the pangs of childbearing, and pain you shall bring forth children. And then also hierarchical desire. This is not a good thing. This is a byproduct of a curse. how did they say it? Your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. So the deity introduces patriarchy, according to this writer. And is that a good thing? No, it's a curse. It's a curse on human existence. And to the Adam, he said, oh, because you've listened to the voice of your woman and have eaten of the tree that I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is who? Read the text. The Adam? No. You see, this is the genealogy of heaven and earth. Cursed is the Adamah. Cursed is the Adamah. To be honest, except for childbearing, I don't want to minimize that, women. The human moves right through this story. Not that much changed. Serpent, not a good ending. From the best to a belly crawler. And the Adamah, the source of it all, is now filled with viruses. But the human, not cursed. It's an evolutionary story. Stay with it. Stay with it. You see how subtle this little Sunday school story is? I just love it. Let's keep going. So the Eved, the work of the Adamah, is now going to become, the woman is going to have pain in labor and the Adam is going to have pain in tilling. They're both getting slugged from their environment. The Adam named his wife Eva, kind of some earth mother name, and because she was the mother of all living. And Yahweh God made garments of skin for the Adam and his wife and clothed them. Now the deity also gets in the act of eliminating the naivete of nakedness. And then Yahweh God said, see, the Adam has become like one of us. There's a bunch of gods around this God. Even though we're focused on Yahweh. Did you teach that course last week, Barry, on, this is probably divine council imagery? That is, there's little gods, the B'nai Elohim. And that, yeah, so you know how to read this text. Good for you. And they'll eat it and they'll live forever. But this text is very interesting. This text introduces fear in the deity. We got trouble. They are evolving in unpredictable ways. And there's another tree in that garden. And if they broke one law, why wouldn't they break another one? So now the deity has to take a half step back and say, talk about this divine council. And they have a committee meeting and they say, got to get them out of the garden. Got to get them out of the garden to protect ourselves. So God sent them forth from the Garden of Eden to till the Adamah outside of the garden. And he drove out the Adam. And at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim. These are kind of monsters with swords. And a sword flaming and turning to guard the way to the tree of life. Okay, I don't think the story probably originally necessarily had this tree of life. I think there's a kind of a history of composition here. I don't know where this all comes from, but let's just go with what we're reading. Next episode. So we have, okay, let's stop for a minute. The Apostle Paul says that the fall is when? The fall is when the woman ate the fruit. And that's a common trope in Western culture. Nonsense. There is no fall. My colleagues debate this text, and I am not an expert on this text, but I think the majority opinion is that this little story could be in the book of Proverbs. This is a wisdom text. How does the human acquire knowledge? How did it happen? It's not a text about the fall of humanity. It's the text about the evolution of the human into a godlike creature. So if we were going to put a genre on the garden story, and a lot of the recent commentators do this, they would call it wisdom literature. Do you agree with that, Barry? Sort of? Maybe?
I do. Sure, that continues to have. Your microphone. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, thanks, Tom, for pausing over this. In the tradition that I'm familiar with, Reformed tradition, but it's more broad than that. Creation, fall, redemption is the meta narrative of the Bible. I think that's a very serious and very misleading construal. That you've got 3 points, and 2 of them are in the first 3 chapters of the Bible. And so, yeah, I don't think it's a fall. And there's a challenge to deity here. Seems to be what's going on.
And an evolution of the complexity of what it means to be human. Remember, this is a flood mythology. Who's God? What is the world? What is the relationship with them? How do we function? We got upscaled in this story to the point where the God's a little nervous. And that's not going to go away. It's going to be the last story we read this morning. It's going to upscale. That is, we can ruin everything if we feel like it. We have that. This writer. I love having Barry here.
Well,
We went to school
I'm
together.
not sure you will. But this is so interesting to me that the notion of being like God is the major threat. Contrast that with Genesis 1. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. Male and female created he them. Very positive image. This turns that on its head.
Yes.
And I think I agree with you. This is now revealed as a threat.
Yeah. Barry, if I were ever going to write on this, and I'm not, I really think this text has a highly negative view of history. We think of history as progress. I think these writers, and it's very Deuteronomistic, that history's not going to some apex that's good. History is a train that's going to fall off the track at some point, and you're going to look back and say, how did we get here? And this comes up in the Psalms. History is a dark mystery. Don't dwell on it. We don't think that way. We think, oh, think about history, get your glasses right, shoot that sucker into the future. These writers don't. They don't control their destiny. They don't think like we do in Western culture, where we have power. These are slaves. This is being written during one kingdom's long gone. Another one's on its way. These are migrants. Some of them happen to be educated. And somehow they got a library card. So mythologies are always written from a lived experience. And we were reading monarchical mythologies, which are from a power position. But the Hebrew Bible is from a dislocate. These are the people we're sending to Venezuela. Some of them got into the Library of Congress before they went. And they're going to tell you what lived experience really, the true myth. I don't want to overdo that. Ready to go a little further? Because it gets kind of interesting now. We're not out of the woods because I am not either of these characters in my lived experience. I can do some really nasty things. These characters don't. They're not cursed. So what is life like if you're not cursed, but you're self-conscious and you have power? Next episode. Got to keep my eye on the clock. Now the Adam knew his wife Eve, she conceived, she bore a son Cain, saying, I have produced a man with the help of Yahweh. That's very kosher language in the Hebrew Bible. And Abel doesn't get it. So if the text is saying anything, he's favored son. Next, she bore the brother Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep. Stay with the story. You can predict the outcome of this story just from the first two sentences. And Cain was a tiller of the Adamah. Who's going to have a happy life? Not Cain. He's working with the cursed stuff. But his brother isn't. See how this is set up? So just play it out. And does it have to do anything with who they are? That is it about ego? No. Cain's the favored one. In the mind of the deity, can you live with ambiguity, Cain? Or is everything really about you? That is, with self-consciousness comes ego. What about Tom? In the course of time, Cain brought to Yahweh an offering of the fruit of the Adamah. Is the deity going to eat the stuff? No. No. It's all spoiled. It's been cursed. The deity doesn't want this stuff. Does it have to do with the person offering it? Not one darn thing. Nothing. It's environmental. And Abel, for his part, brought of the firstlings of the flock. And Yahweh really liked Abel's sacrifice. And put Cain's into the garbage disposal. Now, here comes self-consciousness and ego. Cain was very angry. And his countenance fell. And Yahweh said to him, this is a good line. You have to preach on this, Doug, if you could preach someplace. Why are you angry? Why are you angry? See, this isn't about him. But he thinks it is. The egocentric predicament of self-consciousness. Isn't all the world really about Tom? Me? Really? I think it is. Yahweh said to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, it's not really about you, buddy. If you do well, will you not be accepted? Let me give you a hug. This is with my little grandson. He could use a lot of these this weekend. 2 years old, rise of the ego, nightmare. But, you see, he's in control of his fate. If you do not do well, sin, and this is a funny word for sin, this is a purification term for sin, the chatat, is lurking at the door. It's alive. Its desire is, it wants you. It is lurking for you. You must master this power. Right? This is not a cursed human. No human in this story is cursed. Environment's nasty, and that means his whole life's work is going down the toilet. And the deity said, yeah, it is. Your life's work's going down the toilet, but it's not you. It's the environment. And Cain says, no, it's about me. It's about me. I'm angry. And the deity says, oh, you're an ethical being now. There's things you better control. You better own your status. Why? Because there's powers that want you. They want you. You got to fight it off. So far, so good. You with me? These are very powerful, simple texts, but they go. Then Cain said to his brother Abel, "Hey, let's go for a walk in the woods." Uh-oh. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother and he killed him. It is all about him. And now it's all about Abel too. Then Yahweh said to Cain, "Where's your brother?" And he said, "I don't know. I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And Yahweh said, "What have you done?" Now what? Yahweh knows something. How does he know it? He knows it from the Adamah. He doesn't know it from the act. Read the text. What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood, it's alive now, is crying to me. From where? From the Adamah. Blood out of context is the core of Judaism and Christianity. And you got to get the toothpaste back in the tube, because once it's out of the tube, you've unleashed violence without control. So most religious rituals are manipulations of blood because blood is the source of violence. And here's the beginning of it to this writer. And so what happens? Look at the move here, friends. Look at the move. You're cursed, Cain. So the text takes the next step now. It's not this complicated world, but the fairly pure human. Oh no. We've just joined the dark side. The Hatat got you. And now you are cursed from the Adamah. The language here is so, I mean, you could write a novel, about this. You are cursed from the Adamah. Read the prepositions, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the Adamah, right? It's already been cursed. Now it's double whammy, man. This is Chernobyl. When you till, it will no longer yield to you its strength, and new motif, you will be alienated from your environment. You no longer have place. You no longer are present to this place. Very modern concept. Sartre, alienation. Alienation is a byproduct of blood pollution. You can't find your place anymore. And Cain says, "Oh no! The punishment is greater than I can hear. Today you have driven me away from Adamah. And I will be hidden from your face. I will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Anyone who meets me will kill me." Why? He's extraneous now. Alienated. Then Yahweh said to him, "I don't really know what this means." Not so. Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance. I'm not sure what that means. And Yahweh put a mark on him. Not sure what that means either. So that no one who came upon him would kill him. The mark of Cain. Somehow it's a protective device. Now we're in my world. I know this world. This week, I can give you a million examples of this world. This is full-blown human existence as I know it now. Murder, war, alienation, migration. Of course, finally, finally, this mythology has come, okay. You see how it's an evolutionary story? Not one, you can't pick an episode. You got to move through these. Now, I want to, so what happens to Cain? Cain, there's a woman in our field, just forgot her name, wrote on this. Cain and then Canaan, he represents technology in the ancient world to these writers. That is, he's a metallurgist. And metallurgy is an act of creation that's stronger than the original. Alloys. So people who can do alloys. Think years ago, we went to Prague, and there's all these little houses. I forget who the king was. My history isn't that good. We're hired to make gold. They were alchemists. And that was considered magic because this king wanted gold, a Midas kind of deal. Cain is a metallurgist. That is, he represents high culture to our writer. He represents building. He represents cities. He represents music. He represents metallurgy. All actions that abstract you from the Adamah. We view them as high culture. Our writer says, you might want to think that through a little bit. See, this writer's got bite. This writer's anti-authoritarian and anti-monarchical. You worship that kind of, you think that's so good? You know how that started, don't you? Blood pollution. And it feeds on it. You see how this writer is not an ancient Near Eastern author praising kings and talking about the great cultures dropping down from heaven. This author is saying, I'm not so sure. Feel it? Hebrew Bible is very anti-authoritarian text. It's written by slaves. It's written by migrants. So we get his genealogy. I'll give it to you quickly. He begets Enoch, who is what? He's the city builder. You see, this is high culture. And then we get some other people and eventually get to one of the descendants named Lamech. And now, I was just in New York. I was just in Times Square. This could actually be a true story. Lamech goes out for a walk. He's got 2 concubines. He's out for his evening stroll. Comes across 2 little boys and he kills them both. Needed some exercise. Goes home and he says to his 2 concubines, great walk, killed 2 boys. That is, blood violence now is. And the deity, now welcome to the world of the flood. Remember, we're reading the flood mythology. Looks at this mess and says, I'm into the next section. Yahweh saw the wickedness of the Adam was great on earth. How great, Yahweh? They're incapable of a good thought. They're completely dark. Every inclination of the thoughts of the heart of the Adam was evil full time. Okay. So Yahweh repented, nicham. That's the same word we use in religion. I repent. We do it liturgically. Yahweh here is repenting. This was not a good idea. That he had made the Adam on the earth and grieved in his heart. So Yahweh said, you know what? I'm going to wipe it out. I'm going to wipe out everything. The Adam, everything I've created on the Adamah, together with animals, creeping things, birds of the air. Why? For I, nicham, that I have made them. But there's this one guy, Noah. whose name means rest in Hebrew. I'm not sure it means that much for this writer, but maybe. Found favor in the sight of Yahweh. And then we get the story of the flood, which I really go read it. It's standard tropes: preparation and time, 7 days, the effect, 40 days, death of all living creatures. At the end, 40 days. Then we get the tropes of the raven, the dove, the window opening. So that our writer's kind of taking Cliff's notes here. And then this is interesting. We get the ending from this writer. Then Noah built an altar to Yahweh and took every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when Yahweh ate it for brunch, smelled it, his pleasing odor, Yahweh said in his heart, oh no, I will never again curse Arar, the Adamah, because of the human. I'm not going to do this. Why? Because the flood was a total train wreck. There still is not one good thought in this human. So this version of the flood is just a nightmare. So the worst of pre-flood growing apocalypticism continues in the post-flood. Now I want to show you that because our writer really, remember, we're always writing pre-post. What is our writer? How does our writer make this point to us? We start with a garden, clay motion, evolves into sexuality, Cain, murder, no good thought. Flood ends, no good thought. Let's have a garden story again. And that's what we get. The next story after the flood is a new garden story. So we got to compare and contrast when we read this. Now the new human in the garden is the one who found favor in the sight. And it's going to repeat a lot of the motifs. So you want to read for a minute? And we're almost done. We're going to make it, people. We're going to make it. I didn't know if we would or not. Noah, an Ish of the Adamah, planted a garden, but he didn't plant just any garden. Remember, this is a Wild West show now. He went to California and he planted a vineyard. That is, his own crops dominate him. He can't even control himself when he eats his crops. He's a drunk. So our writer's got a repetition and is now doubling down. He planted a vineyard, he drank some of the wine, and he got drunk. And we're back to the naked motif. He's naked as a jaybird. Do you see how these stories are talking to each other? This is a sinister story. This is the deepest, deep bowel, sinister story. Let's keep reading. And Ham, the father of Cain, this is an edited story. I think I'd have to do the work to clean this up. And I can't do it off the top of my head, but I don't think Ham is actually in this story originally, or else Canaan is put in. There's a history of editing here. Our writer hates Canaanites. Our writer doesn't give two hoots about North Africans. But this text comes through in history proving the author's point. I'll kind of illustrate that for you. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw it. Oh my God, Dad's naked as a jaybird in the tent. All right, huge violation, huge sexual violation. Father, son, intimacy. And he goes on and he tells his two brothers. And then Shem and Japheth took a garment and they kind of walk backwards. They don't see their dad laying there naked and they cover him. And when Noah woke, little hangover, but he's articulate, from the wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. Here we go. Be critical readers now. All these motifs you've seen before, but you've seen them in the mouth of the deity, not a human. Cursed be Canaan. The human has grown in power. The human's taken over the power to curse. I'll take that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Cursed be Canaan. And what does it mean now when you start cursing within the human family? Slavery. Slavery. You're not a real human. You're fodder for me. Lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers. And he said, blessed, there's a magical, blessed by the Lord my God be Shem. And let Canaan be a slave to him. So this post-flood human is enormously powerful and is introducing the world I live in, vast social hierarchy. May God make space for Japheth and let him live in the tents of Shem and let Canaan be their slave. And then Noah lived another 300 and some years before he kicked the bucket. He's the last of the long livers. That pre-flood, post-flood, because he lived in both eras. So he had good genes. Okay. Post-apocalyptic world, flood. What is our author saying? Flood's a stinking failure. Don't go read that mythology of the ancient Near East as though something got solved or post-flood is the introduction of the human as a more powerful person who has the ability to create vast hierarchies of power, which only the gods could do in the ancient Near East. Humans didn't do this. I mean, there were kings. It was assumed in these mythologies, but they don't play this out. And our writer says, oh, no. Yeah, it doesn't get any worse. Well, it could get worse. Okay, Tom, how could it get worse? Let's read one more story. So the last story of the flood narrative in Genesis 1 to 11 is a story you all know, the Tower of Babel. Right? The Tower of Babel, which is probably a euphemism for probably the Babylonian Empire. So we got a slave author, we got a migrant, we got a refugee. These are exiles. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar, and they all settled there. And they said to one another, come on, let's build some bricks and let's burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And then they said, let's build ourselves a city. Okay. This is the epitome of the Cain. Let's build a city, and not just any city. Think Jack and the Beanstalk as a city. We're going to build this sucker right to heaven. We're going to storm heaven. Now, the deity was worried about this in the first garden story. You got to watch these humans. They get that tree, we're toast. They don't need the tree anymore. That's how powerful they are. We will storm heaven ourselves. Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built, and Yahweh said, oh no, look, they are one people, they have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible. The power of the human. Think nuclear weapons. Want to just nuke it? Let's nuke it. Get me on that spaceship, though. Come, let us go down. Confuse their language. This is multiculturalism. Let's introduce it. Why? So that they can't really plan well. So Yahweh scattered them abroad from the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, it is called Babel, because there Yahweh confused the language of all the earth, and from there Yahweh scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. The end of the flood narrative. It's an evolutionary story, but do you see it's an evolutionary story that really doesn't have a break? It's an evolutionary story that just keeps going right through the flood, right through the new vineyard, right to the Tower of Babel. Our writer doesn't see a quick fix in a flood, in a divine intervention. I don't think God's worked that way. And if they tried it, they're miserable at it. How do you transform the polluted world? How do you get rid of blood pollution? How do you get rid of virus in the creation? Our writer thinks the only way you do it is with humans. Starts a whole nother story about one displaced migrant who then had Abraham and Terah, they moved to Iran. This is the irrelevant people. And then they start a different kind of story. And that's most of the Bible. But the template for that story is the one we just read. And that is, I don't think our writer is crazy about the flood story. But it cannot be avoided because it is cosmological and hardwired. So, yeah, Doug, we're going to let's ask our 4 questions. What is power to this writer? What is the ultimate power? Well, there's God, right? There's Yahweh, but Yahweh, I think, has a council, although our writer's not that interested in the council. Our other writer introduces them to B'nai Elim, but those little rascals sleep with women and produce hybrid creatures. Not good. So if you take the end of the story, then you have to throw the human into the cosmological mix, don't you? Am I overstating the story? Maybe. Might be overstating that point. What is the world? What is creation to this writer? It's an ecological disaster. An ecological disaster, and the main virus is the human, because they let loose blood pollution. So we're the virus, but the creation is kind of contemporary. What is the relationship between God and creation? Does God want God's world back? This writer never says it. I can answer that if I read on. There's definitely concern. There's fear. There's divine fear. Who's the human? Where's the human in this? I like vineyards, personally. I like mine. That vineyard story is one of the most ruthless stories in the Bible. Well, look at the history of interpretation around Black slavery. Whites used that story. Why are you a slave? Why? Oh, it's divinely. It's an evil story. Think of the 250 years of slavery in North America. I'd say 2/3 of my students were African American. They hated this story. They feared this story. Didn't just hate it, feared it. Didn't want to read it. They thought, well, maybe that reading's right. See, the power of myth through time can kill the psyche. So what do you think? Any thoughts? Because we're done. Isn't it amazing how a simple story, though, packs a wallop? Yeah.
You obviously found a library card for this to get past Reformed. Can you share Can you share your library card in the form of a bridging bibliography?
For the flood stuff?
You have to get into this way of thinking.
Yeah, this is so common in I'm giving you nothing particularly interesting in my field. This is Intro to Hebrew Bible 101 at my seminary, year after year. This is some of the first. So all the major commentaries will lay this out and there's so many now. There's Westermann's 3-volume, which is dated, but lays all this stuff out. Barry, what's more recent? Wenham, who's a conservative evangelical, all this is there. Yeah, this is pretty, it's just that there has been and I'm surprised at this, and I'm not blaming Doug, but there has been a flight from intellectual honesty in Protestantism. It's hurt. We're all trained to the max. All your clergy are trained to the max. They know this. They've been trained in this. I flunked them. When I taught freshmen at Calvin, they wrote research papers on the flood for me. And they were smart kids. And in those days, we were still working with something called the source criticism. And I'd say, okay, find the P version, find the J version, tell me what's going on here. These little freshmen, give them 5, 6 books and they'd write it up. There it is. It's hardwired. You know this. But then you get a crisis like we just went through same-sex stuff. And then people start reading the Bible like their brain fell out of their ears. It just so insults me because I know these people. I know these clergy. A lot of them I trained. My whole career, I consider it basically a failure because somehow the brain leaves when you leave the door. This is when you kick it in. This is it. This is when it matters. And get into political groups, you're fighting about politics. Who really cares? Do the deed. Go for it. Am I preaching? Yeah. So yeah, Bob, go to Hope's Library and pull out. I think Walter Brueggemann's such a good writer, but I don't think he goes very deep, Barry. I don't think you'd get what you want there. Yeah, but we pull Westermann, Wenham, George Coates, I think, but his is a short commentary, form criticism. There's a ton of them. And there's a lot of monographs. Best one is a Scandinavian scholar. I forgot his name. Not hard to read, though. It's hard to read.
Do you do any reading in René Girard on mimetic desire? And that puts an interpretation that the big problem is wanting what somebody else has. And I think you can take that theme.
There it is.
With Eve.
There it is.
Yeah. And with the
And
serpent. Yeah. Right. Wanting what somebody
They
else
all
has.
have that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
René
Absolutely.
Girard. Yeah. Read in a lot of books, French. I think he's no longer alive.
Yep. That's what these writers see. This isn't old primitive literature. These people are so sophisticated and they're so economical. Took Girard books and books to say what this writer said in 2.5 pages. You see how good it is? How sophisticated? Yeah. Well, go for it.
Thanks so much, Tom. It's
Yeah.
just really invigorating to see a scholar read the text so closely.
Mhm.
And I want to thank you personally
Mhm.
for
Thanks,
doing
Barry.
that. I just a broad question. Do you see this essentially as a world historical kind of composition, or is this specifically an Israelite composition? In other words, is this a reaction, maybe you were hinting at it, to the exile in some way, especially ending with the Tower of Babel? Babel, as you pointed out, is the word Babylon.
Right.
So it's transparent when you get
Yeah.
to the end of this
Yeah.
1 through 11. What's your feeling?
Barry, I think this writer is not cosmological. It's the P author that is, and that's why the P Genesis 1 is one of the most sophisticated texts in the Hebrew Bible, in all of Bible, because it engages Babylonian science directly. Have Barry teach a course on that. It is just mind-boggling what that writer did intellectually.
So you see it as maybe
That
a
one I do.
It's a broadening.
No, I
He
don't.
had, P had J probably.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't think the author of Genesis 1 particularly liked this story.
Okay.
Thought it was interesting, sort of,
Mhm.
because it didn't really deal with blood the way it had to be dealt with. Blood was so much more toxic to the writer of Genesis 1. And this writer doesn't give you a solution to blood. The other writer does. It gives you the original sacrificial system at the end of the flood, which basically comes down from heaven. Here's the hospital I want you to build. These are the doctors I want you to do. And this is how you're going to deal with blood. And then you got to go over to Leviticus, see how it all works. And if you want to understand the Jesus tradition, Judaism kind of moved into kosher law. It's early Christians that went back to Leviticus and said, we like this a lot, and we're doing this with Jesus. So we really took on the priestly tradition in Christianity, high blood manipulation. And with high blood manipulation comes high health care, you see.
Do you see that, say, being the case? Do you see that being reflected in the kind of attitudes? I don't want to get too denominational here, but the purity bros, okay? There's kind of with the whole, I'm coming out of the CRC environment here when I say this, but there's a real concern to get back to purity issues.
Yeah, but it's not blood-based. It's hyper morality. It's not even religion. It's politics.
Well, I would
Religion-
agree totally with that.
Religion doesn't do this. Religion is always metaphysics. You got to get the source problem right. And then you can have varieties of ethical solutions. Ethics isn't religion. It just isn't. Religion is about pollution defined not as morality, but as ontology. Ontology. You got fourth stage cancer. What are we going to do about that? I don't really care if you help someone cross the street right now. That ain't going to help you. That's religion. And that's blood manipulation. I know that sounds so crass to you, but you've got to get back to that. Because you got to understand the rituals you say when you do communion. They're just nasty. You eat flesh, you drink blood. In so doing, you transform time, space. You are with another group of people, the dead. You're doing a trans-temporal activity. I'm not making this up. It's just that we've dummied down religion into morality for so long that it's so boring. It's just politics. Why do you think churches are empty? There's no magic. There's nothing that gets you to where you got to get to. So you join this church, lean a little left, you join that, lean a little right. Well, I'm just going to give my money to the Democrats or the Republicans, whatever you are.
I have one more question, if I can ask, from the online people. How do you challenge Pauline writings which focus on the sin within man, not the sinful Adamah? The whole substitutionary atonement view is built on man as sinner.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to go to the Cain story. You got to go to the Cain story. See, Paul read the pre-story is the false story. Paul read that. Paul's a very let's call it creative reader. He'd have flunked my intro class. He's a very midrashic, spiritually driven reader of the Hebrew Bible. And yeah, he went to that you just read the text. I don't have anything to say about it. You read it. You are on your own 2 feet. There's the text. You got to go to Cain to internalize desire as an evil force. God, it wants you. It's after your little psyche. And he gave into it. snuck in them.
In regard to the Cain story, though, where you said he just rejected Cain's offering because it was from the ground. But Cain, it just says he brings an offering of the fruit of the Adamah, while Abel, he just didn't bring an offering. He brought the firstlings of his flock, and not just the firstling, the preferred fat portions.
Yeah, but don't go too far with that. These are what else is he going to do? He's doing an animal sacrifice. Actually, this story gets very problematic when you read the larger Genesis 1, because the other author is a vegetarian. Right? Do the old Sunday school. What? How can he do an animal sacrifice when the whole world's vegetarian? Well, it's vegetarian when you read Genesis 1. So you have two authors, they're kind of bumping heads. These texts don't always line up well. But the animal sacrifice to our writer, of course. And if you stay in the narrative world of that writer, no animal's been cursed. Now, had he sacrificed the serpent, there would be a problem. So yeah, I think animals, humans, they're not cursed, but they now live in a fairly complicated world. That has been. It's an ecological motif. Very current, isn't it? Yeah.
Tom?
Yep.
Our minds are blown, so it's time.
Are they really, or are they?
No.
I mean, you read this now. You own it? Do you own it, or you think I'm just a psychopath? It's kind of right there in front of you. I didn't read into this in any way, really.
I was trying to bring it to an end, but I think Tom will stay if you'd like to have more conversation.
Will he?
No, I think he will.
Thank you. If you want to finish the flood story, you have Barry teach you Genesis 1, and then you have the full picture, and that would be fun. You know, I just celebrated my 50th wedding anniversary this weekend. We were in New York City.